We are scientists. We are politicians. We are the experts. We are your leaders. We rule over you. Do not question what we have told you. Do not trust your senses, the 5 senses which you have, will ultimately lead you to question us, and that cannot be acceptable. That cannot be tolerated. Do not trust your 5 senses. If there is anything that we need you to understand about us, it is this: we despise him. We do not want him anywhere here. He is not welcomed in this world.
We hate him, and we will do whatever we can to fight against him.
We are the scientists. We are the ones who rule over you.
I am Robbie Davidson, and for as long as I can remember, finding and knowing the truth has been important to me. So about 2 years ago, I started to discover that there were fundamental ideas about our world that were being presented as scientific realities that had not been proven in the least. As a Christian, I felt a strong sense of responsibility to research, discover, scrutinize, and share what I had learned. So I thought it best to introduce you to some of the people I've learned from on my quest. Many whom are scientists, but also others who are regular people like you and me, who are dedicated, willing to do the work necessary to uncover the falsehoods that have been propagated in the name of science. Not true science that requires strict methodology. What we have been subject to is not science at all, but scientism. So why do we accept their conclusions? Are scientists the new gods? Not to be questioned? Beyond reproach? Is it because we are not scientists ourselves? We didn't do the experiments. We didn't look up the results. We didn't analyze the data. We simply assumed that because scientists said so, it must be. What I'm aiming to do, along with the people I will introduce you to in this documentary, is to shine the light in the darkness, to see that scientism has been masquerading all along as the truth. Science, in its pure form, is a humbling experience by which people can learn they are not gods, and the truth is a value higher than themselves. So if what we have before us is a deliberate deception and a larger agenda, then we are in a battle for the truth. And this is the next chapter.
Scientism Exposed 2.
It might come as a surprise to most people that one of the most dangerous worldviews one can hold is scientism. The failing of science is not really about the scientific method. It is about a largely unrecognized epistemology that developed as a result of the successes of science. This faulty epistemology can be called scientism, and we should make a sharp distinction between science and scientism.
Today, all we have is speculation upon speculation upon speculation, where hypothesis somehow manages to graduate to theory. Theory is accepted as fact, and all you do is add more ad hoc theory to support the thing that you're calling fact. It's still nothing more than really a hypothesis. It's never been proven.
Scientism is an attack on the Bible. Again, to say that the earth is millions of years old says that if you add up the ages of the men of the Bible, and you only get 6,000 years, they're saying that's untrue, but that's what's there. They're saying the Word of God can't be true. It can't be inspired because we're saying the earth is 10,000 or 100,000 or 1,000,000 years old. So that's not true. The Bible says that God created all things in 6 days, rested on the seventh. Scientism is saying, no. It all got created out of dust out here that sort of came together with a will of its own and formed everything. So everything they say contradicts the Bible.
In the Bible, we are unique and extremely special. We have a purpose, we have a function, there's a meaning to our life. And in the scientism model, you have no meaning, no function. You're a fortunate accident, of random mutation over millions of years in a pale blue dot around an average sun in an average galaxy, or in a backwater wing of an average galaxy amongst billions of galaxies in an ever-expanding universe. The message is you are insignificant.
If the information continues to be controlled by scientism, meaning that the narrative is controlled, then I think you're going to see that God is totally excluded out of society, out of culture. Why? Because it's already been done to some extent by other various means. And by controlling the narrative, you have to control the youth. And by controlling the youth, you have to control education. And when you control the education of young minds, then you can change the doctrine. Then you can change the mindset to say, you know what, this next generation coming up, they're not gonna have any knowledge of what true science is. Why? Because they're not being taught how to think, they're being taught what to think. That's not science at all, that's scientism.
It's a huge attack because the God of the Bible tells us exactly. He says, in the beginning, God created, or He created the heavens and the earth. And He tells you exactly how He did it in the exact order. And certain things didn't happen until day 4, but yet we say that it is. So, the spinning model that we have is nowhere to be found in that narrative. But if you attack that narrative and show it as to be false, and you say your science disproves that narrative, then you diminish God. You move people away from God, and you can give them another God, whether it's ancient aliens, whether it's science itself, whether it's humanism, pagan beliefs, whatever. You can replace the truth with error, and people will buy it because the science tells us this is true.
I believe there's an agenda with scientism for sure because of the repeating pattern of the conclusions that they draw. I know very smart Christian scientists that have to keep their mouth closed because if you were to offer anything other than the mainstream secular position, they're shut down, they're ostracized, they're thrown out of academia, they're denied tenure. And when you see that sort of attack on a person's point of view, followed by mainstream conclusions that are always 180 degrees in opposition to a biblical standpoint or Christianity as a whole, that is a repeating pattern that I cannot ignore.
Science is supposed to be about observation and collecting the data and repeating the tests. And so when you actually go and do those things, it's frowned upon by the establishment still, or I should say the indoctrination system, because truly that's what it is. I mean, you're being indoctrinated. You have to answer the questions a certain way or you're going to get an F.
I believe the topic of exposing scientism is so important. I've said this many times, but scientism is like a Trojan horse. It's moved in where people look at it as fact and reality. It's moved right in. Said, oh, we're against religion. Scientism is nothing but a religion. They want the separation. You always hear about the war, science versus religion, right? It's scientism versus God. That's what's going on.
I've heard these people say that they are glad that many people are ignorant and stupid because it allows them to perpetrate their lies. But when you start researching them and calling them out and doing your own research, their lies, their propaganda, it no longer works. Propaganda only works if you're ignorant and go with the emotion. Propaganda does not work if you are informed and you know the truth. This is important because it's propaganda that we are fighting. Truly evil, demonic, strong propaganda that is leading you into this strong delusion, and they're building this illusion on scientism versus science. Scientism is simply religious beliefs clothed in scientific terms.
We will restore science to its rightful place and wield technology's wonders.
Scientism Exposed is all about exposing scientism for what it is. Theories. Theory of relativity and theory of evolution. We're going to meet up with Dr. Aaron Judkins. We're going to learn about his excavations. We're going to learn about his journey on the top of Mount Ararat, looking for the evidence of Noah's flood, the Ark. Some exciting stuff. Just incredible to be able to talk to someone that's actually traveled the world, realize that this stuff's going on, and yet they're trying to hide it. They're trying to hide. They're trying to hide the true creator of creation. You got to believe that.
My first stop was Glen Rose, Texas, to interview Dr. Aaron Judkins. As an archaeologist, he has traveled all over the world exploring and uncovering many fascinating things. Dr. Judkins has a reputation as an unorthodox adventurer because he refuses to accept what has become common knowledge. A true scientist. His discoveries have shaken the lies of scientism. He would take me to the place where dinosaur tracks and human footprints were found in the same sediment layer. I could see with my own eyes that these impressions were not millions of years old, a notion that completely goes against the mainstream science narrative. It would be a day I would never forget.
Oh.
Hey, Robbie.
Hey.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Nice
Welcome
to meet
to
you as
Texas.
well.
Come
Thank
on in.
you. Thank you very much.
My last excavation was in Qumran. We found that we excavated K53, which is probably the 12th Dead Sea Scroll cave that's been found. and in over 60 years. We were the first team to excavate in Qumran in over 60 years, and we found new Dead Sea Scroll material culture.
So we're walking down here towards the Paluxy River here in Glen Rose, Texas. We're gonna make a hard left here and walk down to the river. These dinosaur tracks are in Cretaceous limestone, which according to the theory of evolution is dated at 110 million years old. And so you still see this dinosaur track here. And as a matter of fact, we're gonna walk down this way, but this dinosaur track is walking right through here, right along the edge of where we're standing on this platform, right down through this way. This is his stride, so would be one track here. This would be the next stride right here. And then this is the next one right here. And then this one's kind of under some mud and he keeps walking this way. These tracks, the erosion rate should be 5 foot down. And we see that these tracks are still here. They're not eroded 5 foot down. If the erosion rates were true, going back millions of years, these tracks should be disappeared millions of years ago, but they're not. There should be an erosion level of 5 feet, should totally obliterate the tracks, but it doesn't. Why? Because these tracks are much more recent. This is a great example of a track that's got water in it. You can really see the definition. They're theropod, meaning they're three-toed. So the left digit, the middle digit, you can see kind of where the claw marking is here. And then you get the right digit, the back of the heel here. And so just a little bigger than my hand, about the size of your hand. Every year we open this up to the public for annual excavations, for families, for kids, for high school kids, college kids, adults. They can all come and they can participate in original excavations for dinosaur tracks. This is one of the only places, one of the few places in the world that you can do this. So it's really a unique opportunity to come excavate.
So as we continue this week, we will bring you up-to-date information on the excavations here on the Paluxy River, the year 2012 in Glen Rose, Texas.
Most paleontology professors, if taught in the classroom, has never excavated one dinosaur track. My son's probably got more field experience than those guys do. But my role was really, if this was authentic, then original excavation should show that there's no way that this could be carved. And so really the only way to know is to excavate under these ledges and do the work and the labor and find out. You can't fake this. No. I mean, this is so hard. This is all limestone. I realized that, man, this is really, this is real. On the same layer that we're standing on now is the human fossil footprints have been found. It's been highly controversial, Robbie, because dinosaurs and man are supposed to be separated by 65 million years. Is this isolated to Glen Rose, or is there other footprints found around the world? And it turns out this is not an isolated phenomenon unique to Glen Rose on a little river in Texas. This is found in a lot of other places around the world. The expert said they look human, they match the human morphology, but they go, oh, we gotta, you know, they're in rock 3.6 million years old, so they can't be human, so they say, well, we're gonna have to reclassify this.
Well, it doesn't work with the evolution narrative.
No, even the Bible talks about the dragons. In Job chapter 40, God's talking to Job and he says, behold now Behemoth, which I made with thee. He eats grass like an ox. His tail is like a cedar tree. He drinks up the river Jordan. His bones are like brass. He is the chief of the ways of God. And God is telling Job, he said, look at this creature that I made with you. And he goes out of his way to tell Job, I made this creature with you. Look how majestic he is. Can you describe him? Now the description of Behemoth is a big sauropod dinosaur. However, the commentators will tell you, well, it's probably a hippo or an elephant, but they didn't look at the tail. See, God says it has a tail of a big cedar tree, not like an elephant or a hippo. I think this is more descriptive of a big sauropod dinosaur.
You know, I know my kids growing up loved dinosaurs. They were all about dinosaurs, you know. Why? Because it was fascinating and prehistoric, right? But that plays into evolution.
Scientism and evolution.
I mean, I'm a scientist. I don't know any evidence against evolution.
I mean, of course, evolution was a doozy, you know, for this generation. I mean, even in generations before Darwin and before NASA and before Copernicus and the heliocentric lie, even before that, the attacks was always upon the Word of God to try to get people either away from it or to corrupt it in some way or come up with their own translations and bring in false stuff. I mean, that, you know, that's been the goal. I mean, just like Satan did in the garden, it's always been, what has God said? You know, yeah, you know what God told you, but let me explain it for you. Let me clarify. Let me add to it. Let me help you out, Eve.
Did God say that He created? Did God say that He created everything in 6 days? Did God say that everything was for Him and by Him and He saw everything that was good? Doesn't the heavens testify to the glory of God? In Romans 1:21, it says that the heavens testify to the glory of God and to the things that are made that are clearly seen, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. No wonder this is a critical point in our culture of scientism versus creation versus evolution. Why is this important? Because it matters what we believe. And when it matters what you believe, you have to ask yourself, why do you believe what you believe? Is it because you were raised in the West? Is it because your mom and dad told you? Is it because a scientist told you? Or is it because you believe the evidence? Is it because you also have a measure of faith, whether that measure of faith is through the story of Genesis and the Bible and how things came to origin, or it's the story by faith of evolution? This is the central question. And when you expose scientism, the science, the real data, the real empirical evidence points to an intelligent design that screams out, the creation is screaming out, there's a design and there's a designer behind that.
There are some lies in our science books. Taught it for 15 years.
I think little bits and pieces of evolution should be taught in schools because it is a theory. And after all, we all need to know about different theories so that we can figure out what we want to believe is true.
I do feel that evolution shouldn't be taught in school just because there's so many different views on it, so many different definitions. Like, how do you teach a child the true meaning of evolution when so many different cultures have their different beliefs and scientists have their different theories?
Really, there are two big claims of modern evolutionary theory as a scientific theory. The first is common ancestry. Everything goes back to one universal common ancestor. So human beings, we don't just share an ancestor, say, with chimps, we share an ancestor with fungi. You know, everything goes back to one common ancestor. The second claim is that the primary engine of how evolution took place was a blind, undirected process of natural selection acting on random variations in nature. So really it's an unguided, blind, purposeless process. And that really was Darwin's view.
In the ordinary language sense of the word fact, evolution is a fact.
If you say the word science, that's it. That's just, it's kind of like, we've observed it, we've tested it, we've proved it again and again and again, and so it's science is settled. Well, on some things, but theoretical physics, the theories of the origin of the universe, the origin of life, These are things that cannot be proven, they cannot be tested, they cannot be observed. So these are theories and their belief systems, their worldview. You begin to realize that it's a religion.
True science and scientism as a counterfeit made up theology, because it is a religion. And once you understand that the preponderance of it, the perpetuation of it, is built upon lies, and that it is a matrix of deceit, then seeing through all of that, understanding that the Bible is the authority, and that the cosmology put forth within the scriptures is the truth of where we are with regard to the creation and also the Creator, that understanding it is the truth, then you can push away the lies and then come to understanding that, and then go seeking forth the truth of who we are, where we are, and what all this is really about again.
I think Satan would use something like scientism to deceive people, because who can go check it out? Can the average person he hasn't seen a microscope since high school. He can't go dig up a bone. He wouldn't know what to do with it if he did. He can't research stuff. He's got a job to do. He's not a freelance writer or a freelance artist. He's got to stay on that job or he gets fired. So the average person, they can't look into the claims of scientists. They bring it into the school system, and the school system says, now if you don't answer this the way we say, you won't get your degree, therefore you won't be teaching. Your life's going to be a waste. So, okay, I don't believe it, but I'll go ahead and teach it. That's why we're in the mess we're in today. I will not sell out the truth of the Bible just so I can get a paycheck from my local school or the university. I've come all the way to make a PhD, and they won't let me get it because I won't make one more lie. And so that scraps my whole PhD program. Yay for you. I wish somebody would do that. But, it's the love of money is the root of all evil. Well, that's the love of money. I want that money the university is going to give me for telling this story that's not true. Well, shame on you.
So let's talk about Dr. Mary Schweitzer. Dr. Mary Schweitzer, who worked for Jack Horner, was a scientist who thought, you know what, let's cut open the dinosaur bone. Let's saw it and see what's inside of this thing. And so she did. And she took a T-Rex bone, she cut it in very thin slices, and she put it in solution and over several weeks. And then when she looked at it under the microscope, something very astounding happened. She realized that she was seeing soft, pliable tissue, elastic tissue. She also found red blood cells, unfossilized red blood cells, and dinosaur bone that's supposedly 65 million years old. So what does Dr. Mary Schweitzer do? Well, she does what any good scientist would do, right? She does the scientific method. She repeats the process. She tries to predict the outcome. She tests it, and then, more importantly, you try to falsify the data. And so she repeats the test multiple times. She realizes that she's getting the same results. Unfossilized, soft elastic tissue, fresh red blood cells, and dinosaur bone that's unfossilized, that's supposedly 65 million years old. And how does that happen? If that dinosaur is that old, if that dinosaur goes back to the Jurassic 65 million years ago, why isn't that stuff fossilized? So Dr. Mary Schweitzer says, this is important. This is something we haven't seen in paleontology before. Let's show this to the world. Let me show this to my peers and let me present it in a publication. And she did. And at first everyone was like, wow, this is great. This really kind of rocked the paleontology world in the field of academics, because they didn't quite understand. They've never seen anything like this before. And now they had to think, wait a minute, the implications of what she found is more serious than we thought, because this means that maybe these dinosaurs aren't really 65 million years old after all. If they are, the question remains, why isn't that fossilized through and through? When you have the evidence to say, this is why I believe in creation, this is why I think scientism is wrong in these areas. Although there are good scientists out there, there are good academics doing good research like Dr. Mary Schweitzer and others. But when you have scientism thrown into the mix, then you understand that there is an agenda. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to expose that. We're going to leave that alone. We're not going to talk about soft tissues and dinosaur bones. We're just going to leave that alone. And by the way, if you publish that, we're going to force you to recant that, because after all, this is your career. This is what you do, right? And if you're earning an income and a paycheck and this is what you do, well, you're going to fall in line. So the standard is fall in line or you're out. And when something conflicts with their viewpoint, when something conflicts with that belief system, man, they'll defend it at all costs. Matter of fact, evolution is really the only theory that's defended by law.
The theory of evolution, like the theory of gravity, is a scientific fact.
Why are you saying no? The only narrative that we can push in school is the scientism narrative. And you got people like, I think it was Lawrence Krauss, saying, look, to say that both curriculums should be taught, he said, you know,
that the Earth is 6,000 years old and that it's 4.55 billion years old, which is what it is.
He says that's the equivalent of child abuse.
That's child abuse.
That's not education, that's indoctrination. A person should have the ability to look at multiple points of view, weigh the merits of them, test them out for themselves, and decide what is truth.
I typed up a 4-page report and sent it to the State Board of Education. Basically, it was my testimony in written form. And I said, why would you consider removing the phrase teaching the children strengths and weaknesses of evolution when that's good science? Because otherwise, if you don't teach both sides of the argument, you're teaching one side. You're teaching evolution as fact. And that really becomes indoctrination. And you're indoctrinating the kids with my tax dollars. So you're not teaching the kids science. Science should teach the kids how to think, how to critically think. It shouldn't teach them what to think.
I headed to Crosbyton, Texas to meet the remarkable man behind the Mount Blanco Fossil Museum. Joe Taylor is a passionate paleontologist who has spent much of his life exposing the lies of scientism. He has a strong commitment to see the true science put forward with the evidence that he has collected over the years. It was very hard to believe that the mainstream scientific community have dismissed much of what Joe Taylor's work has revealed. From looking through the fossil record he showed me, it only validates a biblical perspective and destroys the evolutionary narrative that has been broadly accepted. His clear evidence that supports a worldwide flood has been ignored. The approach of the science community is to sweep findings like Joe's under the rug. They cannot accept, they will not accept, and will do everything possible to keep truths hidden.
Hello, Joe. Oh, Joe, I'm Robbie Davidson.
Joe Taylor.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
You're welcome. There's a presumption that when someone says science, that when someone says they're a scientist, they immediately have credibility. And you don't know if they've made stupid conclusions or not. So they might look through a microscope, they might do a DNA test and all that. That doesn't mean they're telling you the whole story. You know, you can test, we had some bones tested or wood tested. One end was of a vastly different age than the other side, other end of the piece. Well, then what's true?
We're going to tell the kids in the late 1940s they invented carbon dating. We're going to explain a little bit about radiometric dating and how it's supposed to work, and then show you that it does not work, okay? It sounds good, but there are some assumptions that mess everything up. If we had walked into a room and found a candle burning on the table, and I asked you the question, when was it lit? You say, I don't know, Mr. Hovind, it's burning when I got here. Okay, well then let's do some empirical science. Let's measure the height of the candle. Suppose the candle is 7 inches tall. Who can tell me when it was lit? Okay, nobody. Let's do some more empirical science. Let's measure the rate of burn. Suppose we determine it's burning an inch an hour. When was it lit? You're going to have a hard time telling me unless you're willing to make some assumptions. You find a fossil in the dirt, you can measure how much C14 is in it. Very accurately, by the way. And you can measure how fast it's decaying. That's just like measuring the height of your candle and how fast it's burning. Now, when did that animal die? You don't have a clue. Here's what you ought to consider about carbon dating. Samples of known age, it doesn't work. If it's a sample of unknown age, it is assumed to work.
It's just really a hard thing. It's really a hard thing. Your world just becomes fantastically complicated when you don't believe in evolution.
Freshly killed seal, carbon dated 1,300 years old. Shells from living snails, carbon dated 27,000 years old. Living penguins, carbon dated 8,000 years old.
I try to make three major points here. One is the rapid burial of most fossils, which says worldwide flood. If you know where they're buried, you know where they're buried under hundreds of feet of mud, it goes around the world, it has to be the flood. Giantism argues against everything starting off little bitty and getting more and more complex. So I have a lot of giant things in here to show that's just simply not true. And the complexity of things. Even these old trilobites over here by the trillions, you know, if you know anything about them, you know they're extremely complex animals, more than we are. These old salamanders over here they're supposed to have evolved from, they're more complex than we are. One of their teeth is more complex than all of our teeth. And they get hundreds in their life. So all that stuff, they pass that off now all these years as supposedly that's science. Well, I'm just showing you, look, the real hard stuff, these bones disprove all that. Those tracks that shouldn't be there disprove your theory that things took a long time to build up.
Well, it's good. I mean, it's great that there's people like you speaking out and providing, you know, locations such as this to, you know, expose the world's lies, because there definitely is an agenda, there definitely is deceptions going on, you know, and when the evidence is presented, like I said, they don't want to hear it. Because again, this is taught to children from an early age.
Yeah.
And it basically, the way I've looked at it is dinosaurs tell us our past based on the narrative. So it kind of secures that story with that deception, but it's unbelievable how much evidence to support the fact that they're not millions of years old.
No, and they're not extinct. Only God knows what's actually extinct. But you know, there's reports all the time. I had people in my museum. This lady told me her dad killed one of these long neck things in an allosaur type thing, and he saw under the long neck thing out in the Amazon jungle. Well, there's no reason to make that up. That actually happened. And there are other reports that come out all the time. Why aren't those taught in school? Why aren't they on the news all the time? Well, they come in the news and they cut them out because they don't want anybody to come along and saying dinosaurs still alive. Well, that means they didn't go extinct. Well, that means man and dinosaurs live together. Yeah. Okay, so that wipes out evolution. This is a cast of a sculpture I made. A professor asked me to make one based on a report from a road construction guy in Egypt and Homs and Uranzora. I made myself a cast and did a drawing to fit this bone just to show how tall this guy would have been. His heels go down about 6 more inches, but the bottom of his rib cage is coming to 9'3". So how tall was the man? Let's say he was at least 14 feet, maybe more. He's the same size as King Og in the Bible. So what's the problem? A lot of creationists get all upset. King Og, you believe in King Og, don't you? And all the other giants that said they were as tall as cedar trees? How tall is a cedar? Well, it's at least 20 feet. Well, this guy would look like a shrimp to them. But these are all over the place. So I wrote a book called Giants Against Evolution to show that, okay, if these things are in the past, why are they so huge? Why are we, the 6-foot guys here, at the top of creation, when you got these people out here that are maybe a few feet tall up to guys that are 20, 30 feet tall? That would mess up the old monkey to man lineup. That's the problem. Besides that, everybody knows the story about, well, everybody knew the story about David and Goliath. And that is in the Bible. Well, if that's true, you know, we can't be putting these giant skeletons up because they want to be talking about the Bible. That's the reason we have the museum here, the American Museum of Natural History, is to disprove the Bible. So giants are a huge problem for archaeologists, the paleontologists and all that, because they shouldn't be. So this guy here, this is us today. That's probably a Comanche Indian, and it might have been, I always thought he was 6 feet tall, but maybe he's more. Some of your ancestors.
Maybe.
But you know this whole ancestor thing? We have been told that people were so primitive, they finally came out of Africa, and they learned to make a flint arrowhead and say, ugh. Well, it's so much different than that. The evidence is so different than that. And the further back you go, the smarter people were. This is called Max Track from Glen Rose. Dr. Carl Ball and the team excavated them several years ago. This is the only one I know of that was molded. It's a little bit warped because the mother mold was probably not available when they molded it. But you know, this is no small guy here. And whether his heel ends here or there, doesn't matter. Whether he's got 5, 6, or 7 toes, it's a little undecided. He's a big man. People that were there said, yeah, we know those are real tracks, but they're too controversial. So what? Why not put them out there? People love people more than anything on earth. And giant people, little people, big people, weird people, we love people. So why not put these in the museums? Because they vindicate the Bible.
There's all kinds of historical documentation of finding giants in the Americas and all over. And then once the Smithsonian and Vatican institutions like that show up, all of a sudden evidence magically disappears. Well, why? Because it goes against the scientism model of evolution. They've got no place to fit giants in there. The Bible tells you exactly what happened, where the giants come from in Genesis 6. And in Numbers 13, they're encountering the giants in the land of Canaan. And Joshua and the Israelites came into the land, and there was basically a giant holocaust, a holocaust of giants, and a diaspora of giants. They didn't get all of them. The ones they didn't get took off. And there's evidence of giants all over the world where they dispersed to. So giants is just one of those things that proves the biblical narrative that scientism doesn't want to have anything to do with.
One of the things that has gotten me in a lot of trouble are these weird skulls here from Peru. So I'm doing shows about them on my YouTube channel called Forbidden Paleontology, because Christians don't want me to work with it and the evolutionists don't. Except the alien guys, yes, they want, because they want to say these are alien skulls. Problem is, this little gal here turned out to be Scotch. And she's in Peru 2,000 years ago. Go figure. So, but these things are, a lot of these skulls are complex. Now this one have only one parietal. You're supposed to have two, all right? But, now this guy here had two, but look how many extra bones he's got between his occipital and his parietals up here. He's got like 30 extra bones. So, are these primitive? Well, that's what they tell us, the poor old primitive Peruvians down there. Oh, really? So these little primitive guys down there that, you know, lived in mud huts and all that, they made all those stones over there at Sacsayhuaman, Cusco, and Machu Picchu. Those little guys, they were primitive? Well, something's messed up here.
As I continued to talk to Joe, I realized that the spiritual deception of scientism goes a lot further than I previously suspected. It was a deep, troubling thought I took away with me as I continued forward.
I really truly believe that most of all this science and the scientism that we've been taught is a war on creation. It's a war on how he constructed it.
It seems like the mainstream media, when it begins to push a scientific agenda, it consistently is leading people 180 degrees away from Scripture and a personal relationship with our Creator. So having seen that pattern, I have now started to question virtually everything that they tell me I need to believe, because it is inevitably leading me in a different direction than what I understand to be true from Scripture. That is a big problem, and it puts me in a position that's not advantageous in, you know, a secular world, because once again we get back to the why is it not okay to ask questions. People don't like that. People want you to be, they want you to go with the flow. They don't want you swimming against the stream. And anytime we question the high priests of our society, aka these scientists, we're fighting the stream, we're fighting the current, and it's difficult.
If I told you that I believe God created the heaven and the earth like the Bible teaches, you're going to say, and where did God come from? And I don't know. But you said, well, we don't know that for sure. We don't know that either. Don't tell me my theory is religious and yours is science. Oh, no, sir, they're both religious. Evolution is a religion. You have to believe. So ask the professor, where did the matter come from? He said, I don't know. So basically, I believe in the beginning God, and you believe in the beginning dirt.
Most certainly, it's the Darwinian, the whole premise that we evolved of monkeys. I mean, that in itself is ludicrous as well. And the fact that they teach that in our school systems, that's part of the educational curriculum, and that everybody is indoctrinated into such belief without second guessing or questioning or ever challenging the mindset of that belief, that, I mean, the sheer lunacy of all that, especially for those that are believers that understand that the Most High, God, created us in His image, and that we are a special creation, and that the earth was created as a special place for our habitation. And so, in my opinion, the beginning of all that with the Darwinian, we evolved of monkeys, that was a setup for, and it's all dependent upon what we're talking about now with regard to scientism and the deception of cosmology. Because if they didn't have all that in place with regard to the Copernican system and the whole Big Bang and how everything just randomly came about, that was what evolved life here on the Earth. And that there's all these other planets, that all the stars are suns, and that each one of them have the possibility of evolving life in the same manner that we find and see it replicated here on the Earth. All that, you know immediately that it's dependent upon the whole Big Bang cosmology and the establishment of what is a counterfeit system, the replacement of the Earth as the geocentric center of the universe and as the focus, as the jewel of the creation established for us by God, and that there's intelligent design behind the situation of all of these things and the establishment of it, that without the whole solar system, that the Earth is moving in orbit around the sun, that we're part of 9 planets, a part of a solar system, all of the Darwinian stuff could not have ever come about.
Scientism is a spiritual deception because it's arguing against true spiritualism.
And this whole topic of scientism really started rising up has been in the last couple of years. Really, I can't remember a time in my life outside of the creation scientists that really questioned science. And they did a really good job of disproving evolution. So why don't we take the same approach to cosmology?
Scientism and the Earth.
I had been doing my research on the occultic roots of NASA. I had already began to develop questions about the amount of trust that I could apply to the research that had been presented through that organization. And I met a math professor and a physicist that were very much interested in geocentrism and ether research. And that was a foreign subject to me. I had no idea that anybody believed that the sun could be what was moving and that the Earth was stationary. They began to tell me about various tests in the 60s and 70s that had supported this and how it was a topic that was very much valid. And so I began to grow interested in geocentrism. That is where I really started doing my first scriptural study on biblical cosmology. I believe it's hard for regular people to look into cosmology. What's one of the most predominant sayings that you've heard in normal everyday life when it comes to classes or things that you have to learn? Well, it's not rocket science. You know, we've been taught that only the smartest of the smart can look into cosmology. And whenever people ask simple questions about how the Earth works, how gravity works, we're told an endless string of numbers. What's written to us looks like it's in a foreign language. And we're told, well, it's just too complicated to explain to the average mind. And I have to ask myself, is it? Is it really too complicated to explain to the average mind? They've set those subjects on a pedestal so far above the average person that we've been trained to believe that it's not even worth our time looking into because we wouldn't understand it even if we tried. That's a problem.
Man, without being told we're on a spinning ball, would naturally assume, no, we're on a stationary Earth and all that stuff's moving over us. I think that anybody that didn't read something somewhere or wasn't taught otherwise, that would be their only natural conclusion. So therefore, your natural conclusion without indoctrination would be that we are on a geocentric something. Everything's moving around us. We go to school, however, and we have the globe in the classroom. So that's all we see from day one. And they tell us, well, the reason everything that we perceive is moving is because we are the ones that are actually moving. So they're the ones that force a heliocentric model on us and force a paradigm upon us that's contrary to our senses. We have to be told, that's just your perspective. This is what's really happening. So being that we're taught that, and that's all we've known through school, I probably would never have questioned it had I not looked into the scriptures. When I looked into the scriptures and saw, it actually says the earth is not moving. It's stationary, it's fixed. It's set on pillars, it has a foundation. Then looking at it from a biblical worldview, I can only go with a geocentric model. So now, all of a sudden, The biblical geocentric model fits my senses. The heliocentric model doesn't fit my senses. So, okay, look, you've proven that they lied to us about biology. You've proven that they lied to us about geology. You've proven they lied to us about archaeology and changed and scrubbed the historical record. Why are you giving them a pass then on cosmology when it's the same people? It's the same group that have this scientism religion that gave us the cosmology that we believe in, and the cosmology that they're using is what made the other stuff even remotely plausible to begin with. And I don't think there's any reason why we should trust the same people that are giving cosmology to us that gave us all these other stuff. The creation ministries are doing such a great job, and the churches, they're good with that, but they don't want to touch the cosmology side.
The earth being the foundation, as Isaiah describes in chapter 40, verse 22, where he describes the firmament being the curtain that covers over the circle of the earth. And that, as Amos also describes in chapter 9, verse 6, he describes where the Most High is seated upon his throne is connected to the earth through the firmament, and he calls it the vaulted dome of the earth. And that the firmament as a solid structure covers over and encapsulates the circle of the earth, the flat plane of the earth. In Proverbs, it describes it as a circle being inscribed upon the waters of the deep. Remember that it is the cosmology, the Darwinian heliocentric Copernican system, which deters people and distracts them from relationship with the Creator and with the creation. And so it is the foundation for the atheism that we see predominant in the world, that it has led more people astray and separated them from understanding the authority of the Word, and that the Bible is truly the inerrant, divinely inspired Word of the Creator. It has separated so many from that understanding, and that even now in their adulthood, they are caught up in the deception to such a degree that they have no close relationship with the Creator.
Mock them, ridicule them in public. Don't fall for the convention that we're all too polite.
Scientism is simply religious beliefs clothed in scientific terms.
They have a belief system that they are starting with, and they're doing everything they can to force science into agreement with that belief system.
If the erosion rates were true, going back millions of years, these tracks should be disappeared millions of years ago, but they're not.
So why not put these in the museums? Because they vindicate the Bible.
Don't tell me my theory is religious and yours is science. Oh no, sir, they're both religious. Evolution is a religion. So you have to believe.
Mainstream media, when it begins to push a scientific agenda, it consistently is leading people 180 degrees away from Scripture and a personal relationship with our Creator.
Science is a philosophy of discovery. Intelligent design is a philosophy of ignorance. That's all.
And so this is the next step of what we see as the strong delusion.
We despise him. You're being indoctrinated. You have to answer the questions a certain way or you're going to get an F.
Do you get your cosmology from the Bible and what you can observe, or do you get it from these people who admit it is a religion, it is a belief system, it is esoteric philosophy?
The world is going to gather together to make war with God.
It's scientism versus God. That's what's going on.
You and I are descendants of Martians.
Okay, and that's not crazy. And that's not crazy?
If we are faced with a common enemy in outer space, it would indeed help to unite the Earth.
If a non-rotating flat Earth does not exist, why would you even use the phrase? Why would you even say that?
Celebrate Truth presents a flat-out truth production. Coming this fall, the journey continues of the biggest deception in the entire world. From the director of The Global Lie and Scientism Exposed.
Could they be lying to you?
A deception this big would take generations to hide the true creator of creation. Scientism Exposed 2, a Robbie Davidson film.
How do you prove a black hole? How do you know those gravitational waves prove the collision of two black holes?
Somehow, eventually, they are able to observe phenomena.
No, they can't observe. It's too far away. It's too theoretical. How do we know what they're saying is true?
You can see an agenda. Coming this fall on DVD and digital download.